From TeachIllinois.com, this is the Teacher's Classroom, the podcast that explores current issues and topics in education and how they relate to teaching and students. Here is your host, Matt Weld.
Hello and welcome to episode number 22 of the Teacher's Classroom. Today we are going to be starting a new series where we look at the roles of different positions in education, specifically in Illinois. And spoiler alert, this one is specific to Illinois. So today we're going to be talking about the regional offices of education. And I have on the line as my guest, Julie Wollerman. She is the regional superintendent of ROE number 3, located in Vandalia, which is in charge of 4 different counties. So Bond, Christian, Effingham, and Fayette counties. She's been in
and Montgomery. 5 counties.
5
Matt.
counties. Oh, well, that's not in your thingy.
I'm sorry.
Montgomery County. So 5 counties. She's been in education for 30 years. Her background is in alternative education, and so I'm going to pick your brain on that later. Don't let me forget. You were named assistant regional superintendent in 2004 and then became regional superintendent through election, I'm assuming, in 2011. You're married to some guy named Lynn, who I've yet to meet, for 31 years, and you have 4 awesome kids. So welcome, Julie.
You're awesome. Hey, thanks. Glad to be here.
Yeah, this is going to be good because I'm going to ask you all kinds of questions that I think have been percolating in my brain. And, you know, it's like you tell your students, there's no stupid question. If one person has it, another one most likely does. So this is going to be
Absolutely.
It's going to be a learning experience for all kinds of people. So let's just start at the beginning and talk a little bit about ROEs, which for those of you who are listening and don't know, I'm just going to say ROE in the future, which stands for Regional Office of Education. And so, Julie, what's their history? How are they located around the state? That kind of thing.
Okay. Well, regional offices of education exist because of regional superintendents of schools. And we've been around for over 150 years. Our offices were created back in 1865, and how it started is there was one county superintendent for each county, which is 102 in the state of Illinois. And so the county superintendent was elected, 4 years of election, and they served the purposes of serving all the schools in their counties. And as you can imagine, back in that time, there was a lot of one-room schoolhouses and a lot of them in various townships and areas of the county. So there was probably more buildings and different schools to deal with than maybe what we have now as regional superintendents. So we started with 102. We have slowly reduced the number of offices by spreading out. I mean, schools consolidated, so did we. So we went from 102 to 78 to 57 to 45 to the last time was in 2012. And we were reduced to 35 ROEs and then the 3 intermediate service centers, which are very similar to the ROEs, but they serve the counties, the school districts around Cook County.
Okay, which is Chicagoland.
Correct.
And so I'm guessing that the history of ROEs closely mimics the history of Illinois, and that Illinois, much of it is still very rural. And so having one superintendent per county probably was needed because there were, like you said, little one-room school buildings and districts so far apart from each other that they needed some kind of cohesion. Would that be an accurate assumption?
I think so. I mean, neither you or I are old enough to have been around here 150 years ago, even though some days we might feel like it. But in the beginning, it was a lot about making sure that the students were safe and the school buildings were safe, because it was a one-room schoolhouse. So it was a teacher. That was all that was there, was a teacher. So he or she had her hands full enough without having to worry about the safety of the building, handling any legal issues that were coming up. And then eventually, in the beginning, there were no standards for education, but then those came around. So it's just one of those things that, as we know, when you run a school district, there are a whole lot of different duties and jobs that have to be done, and we have to have enough people to do it.
So they kind of came about as administrators for schools that had just one teacher or just a couple who didn't then have time to take on administrative duties.
That is my understanding. And there was a lot to do with the financial side of it, like the approval of the sale of land for schools and things of that nature. So some of those duties that the original county superintendents were in charge of no longer exist because of the system that we built at individual school districts.
Gotcha. Okay. See, I've already learned something. That's amazing.
There you go.
Okay. So now let's talk a little bit about funding. How are ROEs funded?
Well, the ROEs themselves are funded probably differently maybe than in some areas across the country. The regional superintendent and the assistant regional superintendent, there are two for each ROE throughout the state, their salaries are paid for by the State Board of Education. After that, the actual office and the supplies and secretarial staff are provided by the counties of each region. So it really is the community itself and the people around it supporting the ROE. But of course, there's a whole lot to do and a lot of services to provide. So after the state provides those two salaries and the county provides, a place to have an office and a person to help run it, after that, it's a lot of state and federal grants that will help to provide the additional services. There are some state grants from ISB that help us provide truancy services, as well as different school services, such as for technology and professional development. And then most of the ROEs go out and look for additional grants to help provide additional services to their districts.
Okay, so I was taking notes here. So, so the state takes care of real estate and your two salaries, and then the rest is taken care of by taxes paid to you by the county.
The state takes care of the two salaries, and then the counties provide the actual office or the real estate for the regional office. And those are provided by county funds that are, brought in by the taxes that the counties collect. The Regional Office of Education is not a taxing entity. We have no power over that whatsoever.
And I've also heard some people ask me about, when I say I work for, the ROEs, they say, well, so do the districts support the ROEs? And the answer to that is?
And I think the answer to that is it depends on the ROE.
Okay.
For my ROE, yes. What the counties can provide, remember it's 5 counties. It is a rural area, so it's very large geographically. So our counties have always, our districts have always helped to provide funds to pay for the truant officer, as well as for the health life safety officer who does the inspections of the schools. Plus, they do a lot to support. We have, I said earlier, a couple of alternative programs, and our districts help us support that so that all students can be served.
Okay. All right.
ROEs are really a joint effort. It's really a great way to look at how to help provide services across large areas to different populations and working together to do so.
I would imagine that being fluent in soft skills would be a huge advantage for a regional superintendent.
Yes, very much so. You do need to be able to communicate and work with other people and be able to talk to them and listen and maybe listen some more. That's a huge part of it. But you better have the skills and education to go behind that, because you really need to understand the difficulties and the task ahead of schools and how they have to attack those.
So that brings up the point that you, as a regional superintendent, are actually an elected official here in Illinois with a 4-year term.
I am.
Right?
Yes.
And so I think people would just assume that you would be an appointed official, right? Because the state superintendent isn't appointed by the governor. And so it would make sense to me in my brain that you would then be appointed along the same lines, but you're not. So do you know the history of that? Can you give some positives, negatives of all that?
Well, I don't really know the history. I can tell you that many years ago that the state superintendent was elected and not appointed. So I'm not sure what happened there. Or at least I am under the understanding that it was an elected position and then became an appointed one. I think the question goes, if my position over 5 counties was to be appointed, who does that? Is it the 20 different school districts that I'm serving? Because one of my jobs is to make sure that they're following the rules. So I would hate to, if they're the ones that are also my boss, there's a little bit of a problem there of robbing Peter to pay Paul sort of thing, or who's watching the cat's watching
Right.
the chicken house. So that's a little scary to think that you would put those people in charge of appointing me. Or then the other task might be that have the state superintendent in Springfield, which, that makes a little more sense because they are the ones that are setting. I always say that the legislators set the laws for the schools in Illinois. The State Board of Education sets the rules for the schools, and then the regional offices, the regional superintendents, make sure that the schools are following those rules and help them meet the rules. So it would make sense to have the state superintendent appoint us, but then how do you have one person appoint 35 different people in a state as large as Illinois that you don't understand the communities because you need to be there. You need to be local and understand the differences in the communities and what they face and what they need. And that's why I do think that in this position, election is the way to go, because I am a resident. I know what it's like in my communities. I know what it's like to teach in these schools. I've taught in these schools. I send my kids to these schools. I travel around the 5 counties and see everything that's going on. So I have the first-hand experience of these people that I know and I work with and I live next to and can respect the job that they do and the circumstances that they have. And I think that would be really tough if you had to have someone be appointed from, one place in the state, or heaven forbid we do it by committee, because you know how that goes when you get
Oh my goodness, right.
to try to get something done. So yeah, that's just my take on it. I'll tell you straight up, I am not a politician. I am an elected official, but I am an educator first and foremost, and that's what I do. I went to school to be a teacher. Eventually, that's a funny story in itself, but I'm a teacher and an administrator, and I was taught when you make decisions based on what's good for kids, and that's the first rule. So that is what I do.
Well, good. And that's probably why you are a successful regional superintendent.
That, and I surround myself with a lot of great people.
I like coming to your ROE. I'm just going to put it out there. Okay. So what does an ROE do? We've talked about you have a truancy officer. I know you also have the Angela Reeder, who was our first guest ever on this podcast for homelessness, housed at your ROE.
Yeah, she's famous. She is famous for being the first guest on the Matt Well podcast.
She is too. And so you are then, by the way, you are the final guest on season 1. So we've started at ROE 3 and we're ending at ROE 3. So there you go.
There you go. What a great way to go. I like it.
Okay. So you do truancy and homelessness, and you said you do health, life, safety inspections, which we probably should explain what those are. I know some ROEs do testing, right? Bus driver,
right? For high school
licensure,
yep.
That kind of
Bus
thing.
drivers.
So can you just briefly go over all those duties that you manage in your office?
Sure. Okay, I'll try to remember them all. It's one of those things. There's not a list of things that you check off each day. You just tackle each one head on as they come. But for instance, health, life, safety, we are the office in charge of going and physically inspecting all school buildings and making sure that the rules and the building codes for schools are being followed. And in this day and age of trying to protect our students, safety wise, that's a big deal. We're the ones that make sure schools do all the different drills, the 3 fire drills, the 2 tornado drills, school bus evacuation drills, the shooter drill, as we call it, where you work with law enforcement to make sure if there ever was an intruder in the building that you know what to do. All of that, is something that we do and make sure that it gets done. All school bus drivers in the state of Illinois go through a training provided by the regional offices of education, and they have to do that annually to make sure that they are certified and ready to drive those buses and keep our kids safe. We also do a lot of licensure for teachers. In our area alone, we registered over 350 educators last year. So that's a big deal, making sure our teachers, our brand new teachers get licensed correctly, whether they're graduating from an Illinois institution or out of state and wanting to come to Illinois to teach. We work really hard in the fall working with our districts to make sure they're hiring, the appropriately licensed teacher for the kids that they're going to be teach. We also work really hard to make sure that not only are those teachers licensed, but there's mandated trainings that every teacher and every member of a school team has to have certain trainings. And we're the ones that make sure that the schools understand what those trainings are and keep that list updated and check off that the schools are training all those people. So there's a lot there with the training. We do a lot of professional development in our area. That's one of the things that ROE3 since I have come to be the leader that we've really pushed hard. We want to be known as the leader for professional development for all of our school members or school team members, whether you're a teacher, an administrator, or the tech specialist or the tech integrationist or the maintenance person or the cafeteria food nutrition supervisor. We want to work with our teams to make sure that our people have the most up-to-date information and can serve not just our kids, but our families and our communities in the best way possible. We do have the truant officers. So we are the office that works with students and families that are having students, struggle to attend school. We also provide the Area 5, which I believe is 5 different ROEs for the McKinney-Vento program grant, which is our homeless grant. I don't know that the general population would understand all the rules and regs that go with a student that says that they're homeless, and really even what homeless is defined as, because to the average Joe, when you'd read that definition, you'd kind of be like, what? For instance, I grew up in a family, my dad was a construction worker, and we had a trailer that we hauled from, site to site. That's what we lived in. By today's definition of homeless, my family would have been considered homeless, but we had a very nice place to live and go home to every night. So it's just really different, and there's a lot of rules and regs and all the different ways out there in the different grants. So there's always something, but we really want to provide our schools, make sure that we're giving the support services for safety and the success of our schools.
A truant officer, they're not the ones that get called when someone won't get out of bed in the morning and come to school, right?
Right. The truant officer in every area does it a little differently. I think the way we do it is pretty common for a lot of people. We actually have what we like to refer to as the good cop, bad cop when it comes to truancy. We employ people for truancy intervention services through our regular attendance program, or RAP. So RAP is who you call when you have a kid that won't get out of bed in the morning, and this is becoming a consistent problem. And so RAP works to try to work with the student and the family and the school and to see what the problem is that the student isn't attending school regularly. And then if we provide all those support services, we hook families up with support services, whether maybe it's a family that needs transportation. So we'll work with other agencies to see what we can do to help. If the school bus isn't available, what are other possibilities to help these kids get to school and on time? Or are the students embarrassed to attend school because they don't feel like they have good enough clothes? So who can we hook this family up with to help the student in that situation? Or maybe there's a health problem, or, lots of different things that we'll try to work with the family to try to help them get the student to school. And when those services fail, then we employ the service of our truant officer, who works with the family in the court system. So that's the person that has the badge that can issue the ticket and will meet you in court before the judge to explain why you're not attending school. But our truant officers work really hard to try to keep families out of court. I mean, nobody wants to go to court. We don't want that, and our families don't. So, but it does get serious when the truant officer shows up. We've done some stuff that, you've not taken up on the help or you're not seeing the real problem there is. So they work really hard with the families too, but they're the ones that will go to court with you.
Okay. See, I'm learning all kinds of stuff. Okay. You also, your ROE also has an alternative school. And I think this is fairly common. I know in Area 5, there are, 3 or 4? Or does he?
Yes. Yep. Every regional office in the state has a grant through the State Board of Education to provide a regional safe schools program. And when those started in 1996, and then 97 is when we really got going strong, but I believe the first year of the grant was 96, the idea was they gave each regional office a base grant to help them have a regional safe schools program. You could serve grades 6 through 12, and it was to help those students that were suspended, expelled, or were on the verge of being suspended and expelled. And in our region, our safe schools program serves grades 6 through 8, sometimes ninth graders, because we have had a alternative high school program of 9 through 12 since 1993. So we have right now we have 2 sites, one in Vandalia and one in Effingham. And at both of those sites, we have a safe schools program for junior high and an alternative program for high school. And the difference is that a safe school program is designed for those kids that are having discipline problems. And the alternative high school program was designed for students that were truants and dropouts. And then for those before they drop out, what was push outs, sometimes we refer to them. Maybe it was emotional problems. Maybe it was just bad attendance. They haven't actually dropped out yet, but it's really going badly. Perhaps it's a teen pregnancy issue, just different, home life strife, those kind of things. I always say back in the day, but back in the 70s and 80s, you could drop out of high school, walk down the street and find a job and make really good money and provide for your family. And those kind of jobs aren't around anymore. You really need that high school diploma or high school equivalency, and you need to be willing to keep learning, whether it's trade school or college or just tech classes while you're working. There's lots of ways out there to keep learning. And that's what we need to be training our kids to do so that they can keep succeeding at the different choices that they have for building that career. So we have those 2 alternative sites, and we actually have received grant funding to open a 3rd one, because as you can imagine, with 5 counties, that's a lot of distance to try to cover. We have kids right now that are driving or on a bus for over an hour to come to us. And that's huge. So we really want to be able to serve all those kids and catch them before they walk out the door. We want to be able to serve our districts, because when they have that junior high student that's really struggling and getting into a lot of trouble, it's not that schools want to get rid of that kid. They want to get that kid the additional help that he or she needs to be successful, while also allowing the other students in the regular classroom to be able to, go ahead and succeed without the teacher not having to stop and deal with someone else all the time. So alternative schools are different than special education facilities. I know a lot of people confuse that, but our alternative kids are not necessarily students with IEPs for special education. We do have some students with IEPs, but mainly it's a school that's working with those kids that for one reason or another, it's just not working out at the regular school and they need something a little different. I will tell you that alt ed is really my passion. That's where I started when I started working in education. I started substitute teaching, and then I worked in truancy, and then I was an alternative ed teacher for a brand new program. And I fell in love with smart aleck high school kids. Not necessarily the ones that sleep in my home. Those weren't always my favorite. But I really do like kids that, they're trying and they're struggling, because I think we can all see ourselves in that. And they're bright and they have no fear. And that's something I really admire in them. but it's really cool when you see a kid that struggled and you get to watch them walk across the stage and get a diploma and move on to the next step in their life. We really want to build not just graduates, but we're trying to build good community members, good citizens. I want my kids to graduate from here and be able to move in next to you, and you'd be proud to have them as a neighbor.
Well, I think your passion comes through.
Probably. I get pretty excited about it.
So when I was working as an assistant principal, we would have so many slots as a district. Is that how most alternative schools work?
Yeah, it just depends. For our purposes, we don't reserve slots for anyone. We take it, come as you go, who needs us. We do try to make sure and serve all of our districts that need us. We know which districts need more kids here versus other, and it does go by size, a lot of the student population. And sometimes we're probably serving more kids than we should because we had a district that had a kid that just really needed to be here. That's one of the reasons that we're so excited to be able to open a third location, because we were only 3 counties, and then in 2015, when the Montgomery and Christian counties joined us, that really spread out our locations, how much distance that schools would have to travel to send kids to us. But districts that have joined us have seen what we're able to offer and have, they're putting kids on vans and kids are driving and to get here, and we want to be able to serve them closer so it's not so far away.
And those are all funded through grants. You said you're getting grants from the state.
Right. We receive a Safe Schools grant through the State Board of Education for our Safe Schools program. And we also receive the what used to be called the GSA funding for the students, which is now evidence-based funding model. And then for our alternative school students, we have a TAOEP, which is a Truancy Alternative and Optional Education Program grant that helps fund not only our alternative high school, but also our truancy intervention program. And then the EBM funding also follows those students to us. Currently, we have an adult education grant that helps fund those alternative high school students. And then our districts for our safe school students, the initial grant from the state board really only provided enough for one facility, one site. And after we'd been going a few years, we were centrally located in Vandalia at the time, which is between the middle of the 3 counties. But in Effingham County, they were having more students and they really didn't want to have to travel that far. All of our districts agreed to pay a small tuition fee for every kid that enrolled so we could afford to open up another site. So that's the kind of, the help that our districts give us as we give and take and work together to provide services for everyone.
Is that a per student fee?
It is.
Similar to?
Yep, it's
similar to like tuition that you would pay to a behavioral disorder.
Yes. It is similar to that,
facility.
Although it's a lot less. I'll just say that. Not that we're in a bidding war with special ed services on how much a tuition fee to be. But basically, we took what we knew we needed to be able to open another site, and we charge it by the quarter based on the student enrollment, when they come in or when they leave. And I think it works out. I think the last time, we've only raised it once. I think it works out to about $8 a day, maybe. So just enough that we could serve our districts. So we're not trying to make money. Making money is a good thing. Don't get me wrong. But the idea was just to be able to serve our districts.
Right. And so I'm assuming then if you charge quarterly based on attendance, that your attendance fluctuates.
Yes.
So once kids enter an alternative school, they don't necessarily have to stay. Is that right?
And that's a really good question. Our safe school students, the idea of the safe schools program is that those students will come to you and join you for the year, and you will help them learn the skills they need to be successful back at their home schools. So our safe school students stay with us a school year, sometimes more, maybe another half, at the most another year. Just depending on what's going on with them in their life and the school situation for them. Our alternative high school students have a tendency to come here and stay here, and it's not that they didn't necessarily like where they came from, but they find success. And it's really hard on kids when they find success at one place to try to stretch that out and go back to another for another year or so. So they have a tendency at the alternative high school that they'll come and they'll stay here until they graduate.
Well, it doesn't seem quite right to then, once you find success, then put you back where you were unsuccessful.
I agree. I know that some there's, everybody has a different view on that. And I know that some people are like, well, they have to come back their last semester at our school or whatever. But all of our districts have agreed with us that we always have the door open. Our districts are great. They allow our students to, if they're not an expelled student, those students can actually participate in extracurriculars back at the homeschool. We've had everybody from FFA to football players that they're here with us during the day and then they go to their homeschool and do those kind of things. So we do try to keep those connections, connected together so they know it is their home and they know those people. Administrators and teachers come to our building for professional development and they stop in and see their kids, or they'll make a point. And our staff, if we had a couple basketball players, a couple of years ago, we had two young men from different homeschools who both played for their basketball teams, and the two teams met during the season. So we had everybody from the alternative school staff-wise there, and a mixture of colors on both sides. And we sat in the middle of the gym, and it was pretty humorous to see us there. But, those are the kind of things that when homeschools and alternative schools, the regional offices work together, we really are working hard to show kids, you know what, we all want you to succeed.
Yeah. Well, that's cool. Well, Julie, this has been a great conversation. Sounds like you have a lot going on up there at ROE3, and I appreciate you sharing your expertise.
Well, thanks, Matt. It was really fun. And remember, for anybody that dare listen to this, Matt was supposed to make me sound smart and skinny. So if I don't sound either one of those, it is Matt Weld's fault.
Well, I'll work with some magic with post-production to make you sound
awesome.
Skinny.
Awesome.
Because you already sound smart. So that's good.
Okay, thanks. Awesome.
And thanks to all the people listening to the Teacher's Classroom, which is part of the Illinois Area 5 Professional Development and Innovation Initiative. I'm your host, Matt Weld. Please subscribe to this podcast and share today's episode with anyone who needs to know about the Regional Offices of Education. You can follow Teach Illinois on Twitter at TeachILPD, and I can be found at Matthew Weld. You can find and subscribe to the Teacher's Classroom on iTunes, Google, Stitcher, pretty much wherever you get your podcasts. So I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day, and I'll see you next time right here on the Teacher's Classroom.